They buried our names, rewrote our legacy. But through the ashes, the blood still speaks. From Moorish courts to Louisiana sugar fields, this is the true story they tried to erase. Nobility, reclassified, royalty enslaved. Yet the fire never died. It lives in the bloodline. This is more than history. It's restoration. It's reclamation. It's truth. Bloodlines of Fire. Available now on Amazon KDP.
Peace, foundational Black American family. Today, we're going to be talking about the Knights of Liberty, a secret foundational Black American resistance society during slavery. We're going to discuss the formation of the Knights of Liberty. So let's get into it. Moses Dickson, abolitionist and minister, was born in 1824 and transitioned in 1901. He founded the secret Knights of Liberty in 1846. In the summer of 1846, 12 foundational Black American men met in a second-story room at Green and 7th Street in St. Louis, Missouri. It was one man from each slave-holding state to form a clandestine organization dedicated to ending slavery. Their leader was Moses Dickson, a free Black barber from Ohio who had traveled the South, and he became convinced that only armed resistance could destroy slavery. On August 12, 1846, Dickson and his comrades swore a solemn oath of secrecy. I can die, but I cannot reveal the name of any members until the slaves are free. This secret society was dubbed the Knights of Liberty, and its mission was nothing less than a coordinated continent-wide slave uprising. Over the next decade, the Knights of Liberty quietly expanded into a broad underground network of Black resistance. By the mid-1850s, Dickinson's group had grown to include over 42,000 members, both enslaved and free Black foundational Black American men, spread across nearly every southern state. These recruits, they met stealthily at night, using covert communication and drills to prepare for an eventual revolt. The Knights, their very existence, remained hidden from slaveholders due to the absolute loyalty demanded by their oath of secrecy. A decade-long plan for a national slave revolt formed the outset. The Knights of Liberty devised a long-range strategy to spark a national insurrection against slavery. Dickinson later recounted that the founders agreed on a 10-year timeline. They would spend a decade recruiting, organizing, and training enslaved people across the South, then strike for freedom around 1856 and 1857. The envisioned flashpoint of this rebellion was Atlanta, Georgia. Now the plan was for thousands of armed slaves to converge on Atlanta as a central rallying point, then fan out in a coordinated military campaign against slave-holding regimes. By the summer of 1857, roughly 10 years after the Knights' founding, their preparations was nearing fruition. Small caches of smuggled firearms had been distributed among the recruits, many of whom drilled in the dead of the night on remote plantations. Dickson said that 42,000 men were already drilled and well-armed, and he expected nearly 200,000 foundational Black American soldiers would join once the uprising began in earnest. He even told a reporter that plans were complete for a rising. We expected to have nearly 200,000 men once we reached Atlanta. According to Dickson, the Knights battled orders instructed rebels to spare women and children, parole any non-combatants, and treat captives humanly, a stark contrast to the brutality they had suffered. However, they was also prepared to, in Dickson's words, march, fight, and conquer, or leave bodies on the battlefield. Such was the resolve behind this secret liberation army. Even as they stockpiled weapons and trained in secrecy, the Knights of Liberty actively waged a quieter war against slavery through the Underground Railroad. Under Dickson's guidance, the group funneled money and assistance to help enslaved people escape bondage whenever possible. They raised thousands of dollars, sometimes even from sympathetic or duped slaveholders, to finance escape routes and safe houses. Dickson himself crisscrossed the country aiding freedom seekers, at one point orchestrating the daring escape of an enslaved man from heavily guarded Charleston by shipping him north inside a wooden crate. This foreshadowed the famous 1849 escape of Henry Box Brown, who mailed himself in a crate to Philadelphia, though Brown's own accounts don't mention Dickson's involvement. The Knights also forged unlikely alliances to further their causes. Dickson cultivated white anti-slavery allies like Cassius Marcellus Clay of Kentucky, a prominent emancipationist who secretly donated $1,000 to the Knights' Underground Railroad activity. Such funds was used to outfit escapees and to free as many enslaved people as possible in the lead up to the plan for the revolt. By 1857, the clandestine network had spread the plantations throughout the South, with the possible exception of Texas and Mississippi, where recruitment lagged. They was primed to launch a unified rebellion. Everything hinged on timing and secrecy. Secrecy, rituals, and ties to other networks. Operating under constant threat of discovery, the Knights of Liberty borrowed the tools of secret societies to protect their mission. The group's structure and rituals echoed fraternal orders and perhaps even Black spiritual traditions. In fact, Moses Dickson himself was active in Prince Hall Freemasonry, the prominent Black Masonic order. After the Civil War, he served as a leader, Grand Master of Prince Hall Grand Lodge in Missouri, suggesting that even during the 1850s, the Knights may have drawn upon Masonic principles of brotherhood, coded communications, and mutual trust. The oath, passwords, and initiation rites of the Knights of Liberty remain little known by design, but Dickson's later writings hint that he was inspired by the failures of Nat Turner and others, a recognition that earlier slave revolts had been betrayed or suppressed due to loose lips and lack of coordination. To avoid those fates, the Knights maintained strict compartmentalization and cover stories. In 1855, Dickson even created a decoy organization called the 12 Knights of Tabor, a public-facing Black fraternal order as a cover for the real Knights of Liberty. The Knights of Tabor engaged in abolitionist advocacy and benevolent work, which not only advanced the cause of freedom, but also diverted attention from the secret insurrection plot. This clever finesse allowed Dickson's militia to operate in the shadow, while white authorities assumed the Knights of Tabor was simply another civic lounge. Beyond formal fraternity influence, the Knights of Liberty likely drew on the spiritual and cultural network within enslaved communities. Many enslaved, foundational Black Americans held clandestine religious meetings, or consulted conjure men and root workers for protection. Practices collectively known as hoodoo or conjurers. While there is no direct documentation that the Knights of Liberty used hoodoo rituals, it is well known that Black resistance leaders often leverage African spiritual traditions to inspire and safeguard their followers. For example, during Denmark's Vesey planned slave conspiracy in 1822 in Charleston, South Carolina, Vesey Lieutenant Gullah Jack was an African-born conjurer who provided rebels with mojo bags and protective amulets as spiritual armor. According to oral history, Jack's hoodoo charms emboldened the plotters and even terrified non-participators into silence, helping maintain secrecy. Such hoodoo-based resistance was not unusual. Conjurers was the backbone of many slave rebellions, respected for their ability to invoke spiritual power against oppression. Harriet Tubman herself was remembered as a gifted conjurer woman who used herbal healing and prayer in near mystical ways to lead slaves to freedom. In the Knights of Liberty case, Moses Dickson was an ordained AME minister, so Christian faith likely went hand in hand with convert practices. It's conceivable that prayer meetings and secret religious gatherings provided cover for rebel organizations, and that some Knights shared or practiced folk belief to bolster courage. One 2018 historical account notes that Gullah Jack, a Methodist conjurer, dispensed amulets and talismans to fighters as spiritual guards against harm in the Vesey plot. By analogy, the Knights of Liberty may have similarly blended scarce and secret traditions to unify their members. What is certain is that the Knights' pledge of secrecy, initially a sacred vow, was enforced with life or death seriousness. The code of silence was so effective that almost no written records or contemporary press reports exposed the conspiracy. Only much later did historians piece together the story from Dickson's own recollections and scattered accounts by Black elders. Now let's discuss the aborted insurrection and Civil War intervention. As the year 1857 arrived, the Knights of Liberty stood on the brink of action. A date had been set for a nationwide uprising, and the rebel forces were fully mobilized in stealth. However, unfolding national events caused the leaders to hesitate. Tension between North and South were reaching a breaking point by the late 1850s, especially after the infamous Dred Scott Supreme Court decision of 1857 that denied citizenship to Black people and pretty much guaranteed slavery's expansion. Moses Dickson and his lieutenants observed that the relationship between the North and South was becoming so strained that open conflict seemed imminent. Rather than launch their revolt prematurely, the Knights choose to postpone the insurrection and watch how events develop. Dickson believed a higher power might be at work. In his view, the coming Civil War was a divine intervention that could decide slavery's fate. He ordered his secret army to wait, have patience, hold together, and not break ranks, trusting that a better moment or method for liberation was on the horizon. That moment arrived in 1861 with the outbreak of the American Civil War. Once open war begun between the Union and the Confederates, Dickson made a fateful pivot. Rather than fight separately, he instructed the Knights of Liberty to join the Union Army and assist its war efforts to destroy slavery. Many of the trained, foundational Black American men in the secret network enlisted in the Union ranks, though Black enlistment officially was allowed in large numbers only after the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. Moses Dickson himself volunteered and ended up fighting in the Civil War battles on behalf of the Union. In essence, the Union Army became the vehicle for the long-planned slave liberation. When President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, declaring all slave and Confederate territories to be free, it vindicated the Knights' cause and ensured that the war would make good on their goal of abolition. As Dickson later remarked, if the War of the Rebellion had not occurred just at the time it did, the Knights of Liberty would have made public history. Instead, history took a different course. The bloody Civil War from 1861 through 1865 and Union victory achieved the emancipation that the Knights had been prepared to win by their own swords. The secret insurgents was never unleashed in the South, largely because the outcome of the war rendered it unnecessary, and also because Union military presence in slave states post-1862 made independent slave revolts less feasible. There are even indications that the Knights coordinated with prominent abolitionist fighters during the war years. In March 1859, abolitionist John Brown passed through West Liberty, Iowa, ferrying a group of self-freed slaves, and he briefly met with someone, possibly Dickson, who urged him to delay any rash actions. Dickson is said to have tried to dissuade John Brown from his ill-fated Harp's Ferry raid, October 1859, warning that it was too early for such a strike. Brown went ahead regardless, and his raid failed, but it further inflamed sectional hostility. By 1861, with Civil War underway, the Knights of Liberty saw the Union as the best instrument to finish what they begun. Many Black farmer conspirators enlisted as soldiers, scouts, and spies for the North. In Missouri, a border state that didn't succeed, Dickson and his underground network quietly assisted Union efforts in the liberation of local slaves. When the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865, permanently abolishing slavery in the United States, the primary objective of the Knights of Liberty had finally been achieved through national policies. The grand scheme for a slave uprising was thus never put into action, not because it failed, but because history provided another path to the same end. Post-war legacy and descendant organizations. With slavery abolished, Moses Dickson and the surviving members of the Knights of Liberty emerged from secrecy and turned their energies to uplifting foundational Black Americans and freedom. Dickson, who became an African Methodist Episcopal minister after the war, was a man of extraordinary drive in the Reconstruction era. In 1866, he co-founded the Missouri Equal Rights League, the first Black political organization in that state, and helped establish Lincoln University of Missouri, an early foundational Black American college to educate freedmen. Perhaps his most enduring legacy, however, was the transformation of the Knights of Liberty into a peacetime fraternal and benevolent society. In August 1872, Moses Dickson convened a meeting in St. Louis to formally reorganize his old secret order as the International Order of 12 Knights and Daughters of Tabor, often shortened to Knights of Tabor. This organization was founded to honor the original 12 liberators, only a handful of whom were still alive by 1872, and to continue their work by other means. The Order of 12 adopted many rituals and structures similar to Masonic lodges, functioning as a mutual aid society and an instrument of foundational Black American self-help. Men's divisions were called Knights or Templars, and women's divisions, Daughters or Tabernacles, with elaborate ceremonies, drills, and even Taborian lexicons for internal use. Under Dickson's leadership, the Knights and Daughters of Tabor grew into one of the most important foundational Black American fraternal organizations of the late 19th century. It reportedly listed 100,000 members with chapters in U.S. states as well as in Canada, the Caribbean, and Africa. The order's aims were educational, charitable, and economic. It provided burial insurance and health care for members, supported Black businesses, and promoted community education. The Taborian Hospital in Mound Bayou, Mississippi, built in 1942 by the Knights and Daughters of Tabor. This modern facility was staffed entirely by foundational Black American doctors and nurses during the Jim Crow era. One of the Knights of Tarbon's proudest achievements was establishment of the Taborian Hospital in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. Opened in 1942, an all-Black towns founded by former slaves, Taborian Hospital was a state-of-the-art medical center that exclusively served Black patients at a time when segregations barred foundational Black Americans from white hospitals. This hospital, funded and operated by the Order of Tabor, featured 2 operating rooms, the latest equipment, and all Black staff of physicians and nurses. It stood as a beacon of foundational Black American self-sufficiency and mutual aid in the Deep South. Notably, civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer was born in Mound Bayou and died in this very hospital in 1977, underscoring the continued struggle for foundational Black American freedom from the 19th century into the 20th. The Order of 12 also invested in schools and relief efforts. During the late 1870s, Exodus movements, when thousands of freed people migrated from South to Kansas, Moses Dickson headed a foundational Black American relief board that provided food and clothing to blacks in St. Louis. Over subsequent decades, the Knights of Tabor and similar black fraternal orders became pillars of foundational Black American communities, offering insurance, burial benefits, and avenues for leadership. By the mid-20th century, many of these secrets or semi-secret orders had diminished as integration opened previously white-controlled institutions. The Taborian Hospital itself closed in the early 1980s after serving the community for over 4 decades. An example of how integration killed our black institutions. Yet, the spirit of the Knights of Liberty lives on in later foundational Black American struggles. Members of the Tabor and Prince Hall Lodges were often active in the NAACP, the civil rights movements, and local self-defense groups. For instance, Dr. T.R.M. Howard, chief surgeon of the Taborian Hospital, was a prominent civil rights leader in Mississippi who played the key role in seeking justice for Emmett Till's murder in 1955. We could see a line of consistency from the militant abolitionism of the Knights of Liberty to the Reconstruction era self-help of the Knights of Tabor, and onward to the civil rights activism of the mid-20th century. Historical memories and 21st century rediscoveries. For a secret society that swore its members to lifelong silence, the Knights of Liberty left a surprisingly meaningful imprint on history. During the late 19th and early 20th century, knowledge of the planned slave uprising circulated mostly within foundational Black American communities and fraternal circles. Black newspapers and lodge historians periodically celebrated Moses Dickson as the founder and father of the Order of 12 and recounted, in almost mystic tones, how he had once assembled an army of slaves to fight for freedom. A lot of information was retrieved on Dickinson's own recollections late in life. For example, a 1901 Denver Post interview in which he detailed the Knights' 10-year plan and the decision to stand down when the Civil War began. Researchers have identified several of Dickinson's co-conspirators by name, men like Alfred H. Richardson and Richard R. King, James T. Smith, and others, who survived into the Reconstruction era and whose later accomplishments hint at earlier secret work. Oral histories and lodge records from the Order of 12 also preserve the memory. Within Prince Hall Masonic lodges in the Midwest, Dickinson's legend as a freedom fighter organizer was passed down through generations. Indeed, a Prince Hall Masonic Lodge in St. Louis today is named Moses Dickson Lodge 187 in his honor. In the 21st century, the story of the Knights of Liberty has begun to reemerge in the broader historical consciousness. Scholars and history enthusiasts are piecing together the saga from scattered archives, uncovering Dickinson's lost years and writings. For example, recent research located Moses Dickson's activities in Minnesota in the 1850s, a period he omitted from his memoirs, showing how he operated black businesses as fronts while organizing in secret. Public history sites have also embraced this narrative. The Father Dickson Cemetery in Missouri, where Moses Dickson is buried, was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2021, and its significance notes his role in planning a massive slave insurrection. Media outlets aimed at foundational Black American audience have published articles and even short films on the secret history of the National Slave Revolt that Dickson and his knights envisioned. These efforts underscore the importance of the Knights of Liberty as a missing chapter in the story of American slavery and resistance. While their grand rebellion never materialized in the record books, the very existence of this Black Liberation Network challenged the old notion that enslaved people was largely passive or only engaged in isolated revolts. Instead, the Knights of Liberty demonstrated that enslaved and freed Black Americans was capable of immense collective action, long-range planning, and sophisticated subterfuge in the cause of freedom. Their legacy, from the war that set their people free to the fraternal order that nurtured foundational Black communities for a century, lives on as a testament to Black agency and courage. As one memorial tribute aptly stated, when the full truth of such efforts come to light, the foundational Black Americans will be allowed to build upon some public thoroughfare, a monument to Father Dickson, a master organizer of the race. In lieu of a physical monument, we honor him and the Knights of Liberty by telling their story. The foundational Black American family love our brother, Moses Dickson. If you made it to the end, you know one thing, your man, FBA Stoic, appreciate your patience. Get the book, Bloodlines of Fire. It's about the lineage, the FBA lineage, and it's from my family tree. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I'ma catch y'all in the next one.
They buried our names, rewrote our legacy, but through the ashes, the blood still speaks. From Moorish courts to Louisiana sugar fields, this is the true story they tried to erase. Nobility, reclassified, royalty enslaved. Yet the fire never died. It lives in the bloodline. This is more than history. It's restoration. It's reclamation. It's truth. Bloodlines of Fire. Available now on Amazon KDP.